Yes, so I'd like to get to know you a little bit as well. So could you please introduce yourself in the chat box? So could you please write the city you're from or where you are right now, the school or company where you work, the age of your students, and the number of years in teaching. So my answers are below. So the city is Kiev, LC private school, and here's the information about me. Please write your answers in the chat box for us to know who you are. More people are joining, but no one's writing. Right. Okay, so let's get started because I do have a lot to tell you about today. And yeah, so if you'd like to share some information with us, please feel free to do so in the chat box. And if you have questions, please write them in the chat box as well. I will look at them at the end of the session. Okay. Okay, so let's get started. So, well, based on the people I can recognize from the list that I can see, I assume that most of you are somehow related to English language teaching. So, and if you're a teacher of English, probably were a learner of English some time ago. So I'd like you to look back on your English. And this time I will insist on you writing something in the chat box. Well, at least I'll try. So could you please look back on your learning experience and think about something that you did like about learning English and write it in the chat box. My example would be actually being able to do something new and learning new words. Actually, I remember when I was a learner, that was something that I really enjoyed. So could you please share your information with us? All right. Okay, so people are writing where they're from. This is great. Being able to express your opinion on important issues in English, that's a good one. Okay, speaking English better than someone else in the class. That's a good one. And actually, I must admit, I did enjoy the fact that my vocabulary is actually better than that of other people in the room. Right. Actually, it's interesting because if you look about it, it's about self-expression and actually self-esteem and feeling that you can do something. And this is something we will definitely go back to today because this webinar is about supporting learning and it's more about motivating and creating the right conditions for the learners to perform better during our lessons. So the question that sometimes makes me wonder is, what's keeping them in our classrooms? I'm talking about our learners, you know, and well, of course, if we talk about children, it's their parents. I think it goes without saying. But if we talk about adult learners, well, yes, so they're probably motivated by other things. If it's not about for their work or studies, what is it? But when working with kids, yes, they are in the classroom, but it doesn't mean that they are working well in your classroom. And so, I often hear that it is the job of the teacher to motivate learners, which makes our job look like this, you know, so magic at work. You know, so everyone is kind of this fairy tale godmother, you know, but in reality, is it really fair to expect every teacher to motivate every learner? And this is how you end up feeling about it in a lot of cases, you know, and I still think that it's really not fair to ask the teacher to motivate every single one in the classroom. However, motivation is a huge part of the learning, and it does help. Well, it is necessary, it's prerequisite for the learning to take place and to happen in the classroom. So that's why I decided to think about it a bit more. And of course, we all know about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, but actually there are a lot of, this is only one of the theories on motivation. If you look at them, the most, well, different motivation theories deal with different factors affecting motivation. And here are some of them. How easy or difficult is it to achieve success? Need for achievement, fear of failure, past experiences, learning experiences as well, by the way, personal value and worth. This is something that was mentioned actually, feeling that you can do something well, you can do it better than other people, definition of goals, upbringing, which is also an important factor, of course. And I started thinking that actually it's not always that complicated. We can look at all those theories separately, but in a lot of cases, a lot of this boils down to the quite basic and well, genius, yes, but still not that complicated. Something that we know about is the Maslow pyramid, right? And if you look at the picture here, you can see that there are 3 different levels of needs. And if we start from the bottom, we will talk about physiological needs, food, water, warmth, and rest, safety needs, belongingness and love needs, so the need for some sort of community around us, prestige and esteem needs, and self-actualization needs. And actually, I started wondering whether this can be translated into the classroom, and of course it can. So probably with self-actualization, with that level, the top of the pyramid, this is something that some students will do outside of the classroom because they're actually getting the tools for that in the classroom so that they can actually do something outside of the classroom. But in some situations, they will be doing that in the classroom as well. But if we'll talk about esteem, belonging, safety, and physiological needs, this is definitely something that teachers need to be aware of every step of the way. So I'd like you to have a look at these and use the chat box. So now you have 2 minutes. I'd like you to think and write in the chat box the numbers for these classroom practices. Which of these are actually good classroom practices? Right, so 2 minutes to look at them and write the numbers for the good ones in the chat box. Mm-hmm. Right. So interesting comments in the chat box. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, we do all agree about number 6. This 2. Sorry, we'll talk about number 6. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So let's have a look at that from the perspective of motivation and how it affects our learners, you know, how it's going to affect their motivation. So here's the first one. Doing exercise from the page by asking students to read the sentences one by one to the whole class. This is how I was made to do exercises in my Italian lessons. And I hated that. As a teacher, I didn't like it. And if you look at the factors that affect motivation, remember I was talking about theories and the Maslow pyramid, in the red you can see the areas which are kind of in red. Why? This is not the best thing to do. First of all, it could be very difficult, so it's not that easy to achieve success because you have to be focused. The fear of failure, if you're doing it in a group, what if you make a mistake and everyone will see that? Past experiences. Yeah, it will probably remind us of reading things out loud in the classroom, which again, at school, which was not that positive. Personal value and worth connected to the fear of failure, by the way. And here, the Maslow pyramid. All right, let's move on to the next one. Making sure the classroom is not too cold or too hot and there is some fresh air before the lesson. That's a great thing to do. And especially nowadays, it's a must. I think we're obliged by law to do that now. So having students sit at separate desks looking at each other's backs. Well, yeah, there are some problems with that because they cannot see each other. Basically, they cannot interact. It does not create the sense of community. And in red, you can see why this could be a problem. Asking one student to come to the board and read their answers to the task. Well, this is definitely something that I hate doing because it reminds me of public lynching. And of course, it reminds me of my school days. So get problems with self-esteem, fear of failure, personal value and worth, and basically safety needs because we do not want to be there, so for people to, feel exposed when that happens. Correcting all mistakes that students make when answering your questions. Again, you can see that this is not the best thing to do. And actually, I'm thinking of putting something together on error correction and correcting mistakes. And actually, there is some research shows that actually on-the-spot correction is not very productive and it actually does not help to correct mistakes that students make. Asking learners to listen to a 2-minute conversation, then give them 10-minute multiple choice questions to answer. So again, the problem with that, and I remember that some people wrote that this is not a bad idea to do, but the problem is that they listen to a 2-minute conversation first, and only then they get the 10 questions. So that means that they don't know what sort of questions they're going to ask while they're listening. So again, the task is too challenging for them because they just need to have, it's not about checking or testing or helping them develop their listening skills. Basically, it's about checking their memory. And I'm not so sure that this is what we as teachers, English teachers, are supposed to be doing in the classroom. And I don't think that you can, if you get someone who is able to answer all 10 questions after that correctly, I'll be surprised. But of course, some people with outstanding abilities do make it to our classrooms. All right, so I'd like to move on to talk about some motivation in the classroom. And I started, when preparing for this webinar, I started reading a book about motivational strategies by the person you can see on the slide. I'm not going to butcher his name. I'm assuming he's Hungarian, but I'm not sure about that. So, and he actually talks about this. So when he talks about motivation, he thinks about it in the classroom in terms of creating basic motivational conditions first, then generating initial motivation in the learners, maintaining and protecting motivation, and encouraging positive retrospective and self-evaluation. So actually, students also need to be able to look back on what they've done and see if they're making progress, which is quite helpful in terms of creating motivation. And then it goes back to creating basic motivational conditions again. So, and Creating the basic motivational conditions includes appropriate teaching behaviors by the teacher, and this is what I really like, and I do think it is necessary to remember about in the classroom. Pleasant and supportive atmosphere, functional community and group of learners. Remember, we talked about that, being part of the community. Here's the Maslow pyramid again. When we talk about generating initial motivation, it's about increasing the learner's goal-orientedness, self-esteem, right? When they reach those goals. Yeah, sorry, jumping a bit here. Making teaching materials relevant for the learners, creating realistic learner beliefs, which again is very important because I see that quite often when adult learners come into our classrooms because they want to learn English in 2 months. No, but it is our job to actually make it clear to them that that's not going to happen. Sorry. Maintaining and protecting motivation. Here we'll be dealing with making learning stimulating and enjoyable, presenting tasks in a motivating way, which is again part of classroom management. Setting specific learner goals, protecting learners' self-esteem and increasing their self-confidence, and promoting cooperation among the learners. And the last one, of course, is encouraging positive retrospective self-evaluation, which deals with promoting motivational feedback, increasing learner satisfaction, and offering rewards and grades in a motivating manner. So basically, yeah, so this is the theory behind it, just a brief outline of that. Now let's have a look at what we can actually do in the classroom in order to accommodate what I've been talking about up till now. So let's think about classroom arrangement first, because this is something that happens before the lesson even starts. So here's the classroom arrangement checklist for you. Get some fresh air in the classroom. I'm pretty sure all of you are doing that, but if there's something missing, think about it. This could be a good idea. Students sitting around the table or in a horseshoe, not looking at each other's backs. Making sure the chairs are comfortable. Well, it does help. Well, with kids, they're up and down all the time, but still, even with that, it does help. Make sure all the students can see the board. This is important because sometimes we use the board and we forget about the fact that if they're doing something in the circle, they're not actually looking at it. When they work in groups, make sure they can arrange the furniture as appropriate for the task. This is particularly true of younger learners. Yes, because they do need different zones and they need to be able to see each other and cooperate. Also, for YLs, bags under the chairs, books and pens on the desk. Yes, this is very good classroom routine because they do need to be safe, and it's our job to make sure that they don't trip and fall in our classroom. Make sure there's space for movement around the classroom, especially when working with kids. And make sure there are no extra objects, especially when working with kids again. Not to distract them and not to do any harm to themselves or their peers. Task setup. And this is one of the things that a lot of people struggle with on Celta courses, believe it or not, because normally we think that, well, we tell them what to do and they do it. And if they don't, that's their problem, it's on them. So that's why I decided to talk about this. Why is task setup important? Well, first of all, it creates the sense of security in the learners because if they understand what they need to do, they feel more confident doing it and they think that they're doing the right thing. It makes them feel safe. They might think that something is wrong with them, not the poor task setup. Again, if you ask them, well, do you understand? They normally say yes. Not because they understood what you've asked them to do, but because they don't want to look stupid. And they will think that it's they didn't understand it because there's something wrong with them, not because the setup of the task was not done properly. In order to complete the task successfully, they need to understand what exactly they need to do, as I mentioned before. They need to think, they need some thinking time before they feel ready to share their answers. And they need to know what the result of the task should be, because it creates this initial motivation. If you ask them to do something only because you're the teacher and it's their job to listen to you, it's not good enough. They need to understand what would be the result of this, because they need to have a reason for interacting with other people and for doing what you ask them to do. So now, here's a small task for you. Giving instructions is important. So here's the order of, here's some of the stages of giving instructions. Could you please take 2 minutes? If you have a piece of paper or Word document you can write in, could you please put them in the correct order? And then write the answers, the letters in the chat box. Right, so 2 minutes for this. Put these in the correct order for giving instructions. All right, Mariana, thank you for the answers. Anyone else? All right. Everyone seems to start with C. It's interesting. All right, 10 more seconds and I'll show you the correct answers. Okay, so people like starting with C, I got it. Okay, let's have a look at this. Well, C is number 2. And that is an important step. But first, you need to script your instructions, which means write them for yourself to read. This is what I meant by that. I should probably make it a bit clearer. All right, so first you script the instructions before the lesson. Then, and actually that's a good thing, because when working with starters or beginners, this is what I normally go back to, because instructions are very important. If there's too much text, they'll find it scary. So step number 1, script instructions. Number 2, all of you were right about this one, get their attention. Then regroup if necessary. Good. Then we have D, check the handout or the book. Give instructions, check instructions, set the time limit, give the handout, and then check that they're doing the right thing. So those people who have done Celta, they know that giving them the handout is the last thing on the list. And then it's a good idea to take a walk around to see if they are actually doing what they need, well, what you ask them to do, just to make sure that they really got it. Right? Some questions about regrouping them. Well, normally I try to regroup them after getting their attention, because if you chest the handout, that means show it like this. Just show them the handout, hold it, and point to the exercise they're doing. Now, so, well, you need to get their attention. regroup and then show them the handout. It's a good idea, right? Next. So the task cycle, that brings me to my next point, is as follows. First, when you set up especially more complex tasks, you need to introduce the task. Provide students with useful language to do the task, because sometimes if you want them to discuss something, agree, disagree, debate, you need to give them some useful language for that as well, like agreeing, disagreeing, or interrupting in a polite way. So the task language, especially with lower levels, should be on the board, because it will keep them focused on the task and will give them the right tools for that as well. The words or the language that they're missing. They need to have a clear outcome of the task. On Celta courses, we normally call it the communicative purpose. And those people who are Celta graduates, and I know that there are some of them here for sure, they remember about the communicative purpose. I'm pretty sure about that. So instruct the task. We talked about the instructions and their stages. Then give students time to do the task on their own and prepare for it. So if we talk about the grammar exercise, they need some thinking time. If we talk about something a bit more productive, like tell your partner about your last holiday, again, they need to put their thoughts together, and they need some preparation time to think about the content, not only the language. Give them time to check their answers in pairs or rehearse in pairs. If that's a grammar exercise, checking it in pairs will make it less stressful for them, because they do feel more comfortable talking to their peers in a lot of cases, not all, I know that, than to their teacher. And rehearsing in pairs before they do performing the task or speaking or task in larger groups will also help them to feel more confident. Making clear for everyone what the correct answers are, and we'll be talking about feedback today. But if you give them a task, a grammar exercise, vocabulary exercise, a reading exercise, where there are correct answers, we need to make sure that after that activity, the learners know what the correct answers are. And they've been given an opportunity to check what they've got, their answers, with the correct answers provided. Otherwise, they won't know if they completed the task successfully or not. Yes, when you have 2 students, that's fine. But if you have 12 or more, or even 8 or more, you cannot make sure that all of them got it right. You need to give them the chance to check if their answers are correct. Monitoring. That's another favorite thing on Celta courses. So what is monitoring? Could you please write, what does this word mean to you? Could you please write it in the chat box? Right. Any volunteers? Okay, yes, finally some answers. Good. Observe and analyze. There's some mistakes. Good. Watching learners process in the classroom, no eye contact. To see how students work. Okay, yeah, so basically all of you are correct. Monitoring is observing your students and making sure that you know what they are doing and how well they're doing it, and basically it's just knowing what's happening in your classroom. So you can walk around the classroom to do that, just to know what sort of problems they're having with the task and how to help them solve those problems. Yeah. So why do we need to monitor students? That's another big question. And actually, there isn't just one reason, just to know what they're doing. Yes, but why? First of all, as I mentioned before, when we give instructions, we need to, after we're giving them the handout and they started doing the task, we need to monitor it, understand that they got what they need to do and check their own task. They're doing what you want them to be doing. To see if they need help with anything, another good reason. We use monitoring to see if our teaching was effective. Because imagine you clarified some grammar point. After that, you just you gave them some practice activity and you can see that all of them are struggling with it. That means that we need to go back and clarify something again. To choose the mistakes to focus on, which might be useful for other learners as well. Yeah, sometimes you can see that one mistake is like, oh, that's such a good point. I should really talk about this. And yes, because it's not only about the grammar mistakes they make. It could be about the lexical mistakes that they make and which are common actually in our region, let's put it this way. To understand who to ask to give the correct answer. So that's an important one. And here I want to talk about the sense of security. One of the tricks I normally do during my demo lessons on Celta courses is I monitor and I write down who's got the correct answer because I want to nominate the person with the correct answer. Again, if you don't know your students well, or again, depending on some, let's put it this way, psychological needs of different students, we can say that, well, it's not a good idea to actually ask a learner to give you the answer to the task when their answer is incorrect. How, well, can you imagine how they would feel in this situation, right? So we are asking people to share their answers because first of all, we want to make sure that everyone in the classroom knows what the correct answer is, as I mentioned, and I talked about this before. We also want to motivate learners, especially weaker students who manage to get this one thing right in the whole exercise. And we want to praise the achievement. And this is a great way to do that. You just see who's got the correct answer, especially with weak learners, and you nominate them to share their correct answers with the whole group and praise them. So why not use this opportunity? And we'll also monitor to avoid surprises at the feedback stage. I'm pretty sure that experienced teachers will understand me here, because you, when you see that they're making some mistakes, you can actually prepare for clarifying this during the feedback when you check the answers to the task. And sometimes, well, more experienced teachers will often deal much better with this, but you can't be prepared for the unexpected all the time. So to avoid those surprises, it's a good idea to monitor. All right, so here's another task for you. How do we monitor students? Which ways are suitable? Okay, so here are 5 different ways to monitor. Could you please write the numbers in the chat box? Which ones are good ways to monitor? Mm-hmm. All right, good. I can see some numbers there. 2, fine. 4, fine. 5, good. Interesting that people don't like numbers 1 and 3. All right, so in my opinion, actually all 5 of them are fine. but this is, well, I do have one that I don't like that much, but most of them are, well, all of them are okay and are acceptable actually. So number one, walking around the classroom in front of the students. Why not? You just need to make sure that you're not too distracting. When I say walking around the classroom, doesn't mean pacing all the time. It means just, well, sit down, take a walk, go back to your seat. Fine. Walking behind students. A lot of people do that. A lot of people think that this is the best way to monitor. It's a good way to monitor because this way you're not gonna right there in their face, you know, and you're not that distracting. But I remember my experience in my Celta course, actually was not a Celta course, ICTL, but whatever. And I remember when one of the tutors, I was working in task, and one of the tutors approached me from behind and started looking over my shoulder to see what I was writing. I did not like that. I do not like people standing behind me because it does create this sort of insecurity in me. And I know that a lot of people, well, not a lot, but there will be more people like me who are going to dislike that sort of monitoring. So asking learners to give you their book to look at their answers, why not? My eyesight is not the best. It's quite poor. I know that there are people who cannot read from their chair what their students are writing. Well, it doesn't mean that they're bad teachers. If you have good rapport with your students, it's okay to ask them like, oh, can I have a look for a second? Oh, thank you. Good job. Fine. Number 4, sitting in the middle of the classroom and checking what they're doing without standing up, that's fine. But I think it's fine for reading because normally you can, or listening, you can see where they are in the exercise. You might actually need to have a closer look at when they're writing something, especially when they're doing it in pencil. Moving your chairs around the room and sitting next to the learners while listening to them and reading what they've written, why not? That's fine. What I normally do, I move my chair closer to one pair, especially when they are speaking or writing, and I pretend to be looking at a different pair. So this way, well, I like to believe that they don't know who I'm monitoring. Probably they do know that, but still, this way you could feel them more comfortable, because if you're sitting right next to them and looking at them, this could create some sort of tension. So look at a different pair to distract them. Pair work. And again, as a Celta trainer, I see pair work as part of, as a part and parcel of learning, because this is what we do on Celta courses. We get them to work in pairs as much as we can. How can getting students to work in pairs support learning? So here are some ways. First of all, and I like this, problem shared is problem halved. Okay, so if they work in pairs, they can do some tasks better together, especially the more challenging ones. It could help them to build their confidence, especially if they've done something first and then they check with their partner before sharing it with the whole group. It's better to share it with their partner first. It can help weaker learners, because if they're working with stronger learners could help them. It gives them the opportunity to check their answers in a less intimidating environment. It makes the lesson more student-centered. And those people who have done Celta, they know that this is a good thing. We want a student-centered classroom, not a teacher-centered one. Provides more opportunities for language practice. Again, if they know that in your classroom, they speak only English, no other language, checking in pairs or working in pairs will encourage them to produce more English language for practice. Now, here you have 4 situations. Which of these are acceptable for working in pairs? No, actually, which is not? So let's make it negative this time. Which of these four is or are not acceptable when getting students to work in pairs? What do you think? If everybody agrees with 1 and 4, could you please write so? Yes, Elena, good. Which of these are not acceptable? That's the question. Yes, I tried to confuse you. I know. Right. So, well, more or less correct. Let's talk about this. Number 1, asking learners to work in pairs with someone they dislike. Well, it's not a good idea to do that, but unfortunately, sometimes there is a person in the classroom, somehow you end up having that student that people don't like working with. And you cannot just kick them out of your classroom, right? So sometimes you will have to ask people to work in pairs with someone they dislike, but you need to be careful to regroup them on a regular basis. What I mean by that, so all of us do not like Peter. So today, Peter is going to work with Anna for the first 20 minutes of the lesson. Then we're going to move Peter and he's going to work with Mary. And then he's going to work with Paul for the remaining 30 minutes of the lesson, right? So regroup them more if there are people they don't like. Sometimes it's good for them to work with people they don't like because, well, this is life. Life is hard. You don't have to, well, there will be people around you that you could wish not to have there. Okay, number 2, pairing stronger students together, that's fine. Pairing weaker students together, that's also fine, actually. Stronger students won't dominate. Weaker students will not feel overwhelmed by the dominating students. It's good to mix and match sometimes. But the big no-go on the Celta course would be pairing yourself with one of the students. And the main reason why that is not a good idea, because this way you'll be observing one student. And what if you have 11 students in the classroom? You'll be working with one, and who knows what the remaining 10 are doing. So your job is to monitor. So the job of the teacher is to monitor. So that's why it's not good to give all the undivided attention to just one person. All right, language feedback. And giving feedback on activities and language. Yes, not only language. So, rules to make feedback more inspirational. Again, feedback, that means, well, yeah, we need to talk about this a bit. So feedback is basically checking making sure that they know what the correct answers are. This is the stage of the lesson where you normally check the correct answer, or where they share the results of their work together, right? And this is when you give them feedback and tell them what they need to improve or what they've done well. First of all, make it crystal clear what the correct answer is. And I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Ask about content first. So if you ask them, there are some tasks. Well, of course, if this is a grammar exercise where they just have to fill the gap, there is no content there. But, well, there is some content, but it's not produced by the students. All right, if we talk about a speaking exercise, when you want them to work together and create and do the project or do something, describe their favorite city, the feedback would be, what was the favorite city? So that would be the content, because they're talking about what they like. Make feedback varied. Again, a good thing, because sometimes it gets too repetitive. So you can give them the correct answers on the board. You can give them the correct answers on the handout. You can give them the correct answers. You can give half the group correct answers to numbers 1, 3, 5, and 7. And the other half would have the correct answers to numbers 2, 4, 6, and 8. So there are different ways to do it. And not to make it repetitive and boring, make it varied. Praise achievement. It's very important. Don't ask weaker students unless you know what they have, that they have the correct answer. We talked about that. Nominate people to give answers. This is a good practice, because what you normally get is someone whose job is to observe students, to observe teachers teach, what we often end up with is the teacher asking, number 1, and then they get a chorus of to that, and they say, good job, correct. Nobody got what the correct answer was, because everyone in the classroom was shouting. So that's why, to avoid those situations, you just ask them, okay, Peter, what's the correct answer to number 1? What about number 2? And so this is how we do it. Try to involve all students in it. By that I mean, do not involve all of them at the same time, but make sure that you've asked as many different people as you possibly can. And make progress visible. Of course, praise achievement, but also if you can see that they're doing something better, you need to help them see that as well. And including self-assessment, sometimes peer assessment, but self-assessment is very important, because this way it gives them an opportunity to reflect on their progress, and that contributes to their motivation. All right, adapting activities. We all know that we often have the book that we use for teaching, right? And after that, we need to, and some of the books are boring. I know that some people will disagree with me. Yes, there are better books, but not everything in that book will be good for your learners. How do we adapt activities? First of all, personalize it. Because when people talk about themselves and what they like, they often tend to be more motivated to talk. So to make activities more interesting, make them personal. Instead of describe your city. Well, your city is also personalized, actually, but describe your favorite city will make it more interesting for the students. Make it interactive. So instead of doing a boring gap fill, you could get them to do it in pairs, so they interact with each other to find the correct answer. Make it more or less challenging. Again, we have stronger and weaker students in our groups. That's fine. We have to live with that. So there is no perfect group of students. So when working with groups, we need to remember that for some people, we need to raise the level of challenge to motivate them, and for some of them, we need to lower it. So you might end up having 2 versions of the same task or the same exercise. Vary interaction patterns. Give them the chance to work on their own, in pairs, in groups, then in different groups, to make them more engaged. This is good for kids. So with children, you need to vary stirring and settling activities. If you get them to sit and write for 45 minutes, at some point, you won't be able to control them, because they build up energy and they need to release it. So that's why we need to give them 10 minutes, something quieter to do, and then 10 minutes to get them to run around the classroom. Make it kinesthetic. That's another good thing to do. Put some things on cards, put some things on walls, get them to walk around. Set something as a competition, which will work well with kids and adults as well sometimes. Make the outcome clear and encourage collaboration to achieve it. Again, communicative purpose, and get them to do things together. Now, all right, for the last 5 minutes, well, I'd like to mention something about supporting your learning and how you can do it with our center. Well, first of all, first and foremost, it's professional development. This is the collocation that sometimes makes me feel uncomfortable because it's everywhere right now. But the problem is that sometimes people don't know what they need, right? So a lot of people think that they need this, Celta, and I do, as much as I like this certificate and this qualification. Some people will need these two instead. So Celta is the certificate in English language teaching to adults, but we also have, if you work with kids and children, you might be more interested in Celta's certificate in English language teaching to secondary school students, or Selfie, certificate in English language teaching to primary school students. So if you're interested in those courses, you can find more information here. Here's the QR code. Right. And well, actually, those two courses are blended learning courses because they involve a lot of individual work and some face-to-face sessions and some observations by the tutors of your lessons that you teach with your students. So if you work with kids, you might want to think about this. And that brings me to my next point. No, sorry, still CELTES and CELP. Well, those courses are good because they actually help you to improve your classroom teaching by applying what you've learned. And there are 8 modules in the CELTES course and 9 modules in the CELP course. So, and for each of the modules, you need to learn something new that you're later going to use in the classroom. And then you need to to write an assignment to report on how you did it and how it went. So this is what makes this course not only theoretical but practical as well. This is a 120-hour course, and it is accepted and recognized by our Ministry of Education in Ukraine. It involves online study and some assessed teaching practice. Some of it could be done online, some of this can be done face-to-face. And the level of English you need for this course is B1+. And of course, the Celta. And you can find some information if you use this QR code. And the next Celta course at our center is starting, actually we have 2 courses. The online Celta starts on the 22nd of January. And the face-to-face one starts on the 29th of January because of the possible or probable lockdown in Kyiv and Ukraine. So Celta is a pre-service course, which means that you do not need to have any teaching experience to do this course, nor actually education in teaching. It's a highly recognized certificate, which is accepted by a lot of organizations, international and local, around the world. This is actually a perfect combination of theory and practice, and is the practical component that makes Celta so valuable. Because only after the Celta course, well, there are 2 more courses out there in the world which have the same, which are equivalents to Celta. But after the Celta course, the employer will know that this person can actually survive in the classroom. Celta is assessed by a Cambridge representative, so every course is assessed by Cambridge. And we do have good trainers, and all Celta trainers have to be qualified and experienced. So this is what makes Celta and the trainers working on that course. Well, this is what makes Celta actually different from a lot of other teacher training courses. And we can see that the quality of such training is actually guaranteed and supported by Cambridge. All right, so this is it from me for today. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat box and I'll be happy to answer them. Right? I'm going to give you 2 more minutes for this. So if you have anything to say or to ask about, please write it in the chat box now. And actually, no, this is my email address, of course, and the link to our website with more teacher training courses. Doesn't look like we have any questions today. Okay, so anyways, here's my email, and if you have more questions, please write to me and ask me. If everything is clear, well, I don't have much to add today, so thank you very much for joining me on this Friday. And well, it was really nice to see those people that I know and I can recognize. Thank you for joining, and well, thank you to everyone else. So if you have any questions about teaching, learning, teacher training, actually, yes, I need to scroll down to see the questions. All right, thank you for the kind words. Tatiana, the question about Celta. Well, it's not fully online because we need to see your teaching practice, but I would say that 80% of the course is online. The video of the webinar will be on our YouTube channel at some point, so you might join that to see this, to watch the webinar. And all right, so there is a question from Katerina. Yeah, so Katerina, you can write it now or send me an email. So there is my email address. All right, well, once again, thank you everyone for joining me today. And please keep in touch. Right, goodbye. Do we need to have feedback after all exercises? Yes, here's the question. It's a good one. Well, I would say that, or sometimes DAC, delayed error correction. I will say that if you're doing delayed error correction, you still need to give some feedback on content. For example, if you ask them to talk about what they did last night, you actually need to ask them, so did you do anything interesting last night, or did your partner do anything interesting last night? That would be the feedback on content. And then you would do some delayed error correction on the board, right? So my answer to that would be yes. Normally, every activity needs to have feedback after it. All right. Well, thank you for the good questions. Thank you for being here today, and well, and hope to see you around soon. Goodbye.